Have you checked the children? You're a little mad sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if you please, you join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King. That is Reezy. I've been doing this program for a number of years now. We are in our 6th season technically here on the horror show, and obviously, welcome to the proceedings here. That, Cecil, Marsha, Robert, all of us welcome you accordingly and wholeheartedly, and yet I basically have been doing King coverage for all of these different seasons because of the fact that he is my favorite author, and yet his magnum opus is celebrating its 40-year anniversary this summer, essentially. And so when you see it on the StephenKing.com website that they're like, yeah, 40 years of the Dark Tower, although technically the magazine of science fiction and fantasy in October of '78 was where we got our first taste of Roland and, this interesting journey that he was going to be on. But yeah, I mean, this show was essentially started in 2017 because of the fact that we had a Dark Tower movie that was coming out, and I was just kind of revisiting all of those volumes for the first time in a little bit, and it's been quite a journey ever since. And so, yes, there is inevitability of retread with the, over 300 episodes of a program. And so a lot of this, yeah, I've probably discussed at least, at some particular point in time. But this is really going to be just kind of a crash course for anybody who is stumbling upon this for all of the different things Dark Tower-wise that you have the possibility to dip your toe into. And so, obviously, first and foremost and more important than anything else, and I just wanted to do a little show off right there of the fact that, yeah, I rock the King and Ka and all of that stuff as frequently as possible on my laptop right there. But the biggie, and this is a big shout out to the lovely Lady Catherine in the fact that she did in fact purchase a copy of this original Dark Tower the Gunslinger where it all began. So the collected work actually came out in 1982, hence the 40 years and all of that business and such. But yeah, this is, it's kind of a polarizing one in a lot of ways, and I've seen lots of reviewers, most notably, like shout out to Mike from Mike's Book Reviews, but Tim and various others have said that they have heard from various, people who want to, start charting that journey along the path of the beam, and they're like, the dialogue and just the prose in particular in this first book is really tough for them to deal with. And I can understand, it was the only of the entire series that was a fragmented sort of thing, so it was released in installments in the aforementioned magazine before being collected. And it was King really doing something nothing like Salem's Lot and Carrie and the very horror-centric sort of stuff that he was, renowned for at that particular point, and also notorious for in certain circles. But nonetheless, I enjoy from a storytelling standpoint, especially from like a plotting bit, and as far as a world-building bit, this original book, and I'm not going to go into extensives about any of the other entries because on this particular channel I have reviews of all of the books on there. There is going to be a deep dive, spoilery sort of live discussion about both this and the second book for their respective anniversaries here coming up in the next few weeks probably. But nonetheless, this is where it all started, man, with the Gunslinger and just a merging of a little tinge of horror, but much more so like Western and fantasy kind of hitting each other in the face. And that's why I like the fact that King was kind of just expanding his boundaries, so to speak, just doing something a little bit different than what he was so renowned and known for, as I said. And yeah, man, I enjoy the hell out of this first book, and I think much more so than a lot of other people, because I know Drawing of the Three gets so much adoration, and I'm a little less about that one, but that is a discussion for another day. So you have the 8 novels proper, which is first and foremost what I think you need to just immerse yourself in, because you've got, 7 books, and then there is like a 4.5, which is The Wind Through the Keyhole, which we actually discussed for its 10-year anniversary just earlier this year. I've gone on record various times to say that 3 and 4 is where I feel like the series hit its pinnacle, but that's the thing. King would write an entry, and he obviously had ideas, in his head and gears turning and all of that sort of stuff, but he would let it sit and he would let it simmer. And I'm also on record various times for saying that I don't necessarily... I'm not as about 5, 6, and 7 as a lot of other people are, and shout out once again to Mike because of the fact that I feel like the fact that he didn't let it breathe and he just tried to just smush it all together and get it all done because he had that horrible, life-changing sort of situation that really put a lot of things in perspective for him. And he's like, well, unless Joe is gonna, finish this magnum opus of my entire career up for me, which does have tie-ins. Like, these novels, besides the 8 books proper, you have tie-ins to Salem's Lot. You have tie-ins to Insomnia, which is lesser known, unfortunately. You have tie-ins with Hearts in Atlantis. You have tie-ins with, the list goes on. It being another major book that ties in specifically with the Dark Tower mythology. And, I guess you don't necessarily have to read all of those, sort of branching books to get the proper satisfaction, but it definitely heightens the process, it does make it more enjoyable. It's almost like being clued into, kind of a secret society of some sort or whatever, where you're like, I'm in the know about that. That's pretty damn cool. And so, yeah, that's why I actually, in the first place, read everything King published in its actual order of release because of the fact that I wanted to see how those ideas grew and branched and intermingled and all of that different stuff. And so, yeah, man, you will definitely have a more enjoyable process. Is it ultimately necessary? I guess I wouldn't contend that. I have an entire video about my preferred reading order for all of the Dark Tower related stuff, and ironically enough, there's 19 books in that particular collection. So, yeah, I'll make sure to link that up in the description box below. But, so yeah, you have the 8 novels proper, if you're going to include Win Through the Keyhole, the 4.5, and then there's so much more that has been done with the tower, and that's what this video is kind of intended to give you a little bit of insight about. And so probably one of the best things that you can consult about tower stuff is this by none other than Robin Firth, who is really the Dark Tower historian. King actually goes to Robin to, am I writing this correctly? Is the continuity being maintained? And so on and so forth. So there are a few different versions of this. So there was the original, and then there was the expanded. And so yes, you can see I have the soft cover, even though I prefer to collect hardcovers. But that's because the revised and updated concordance, which takes into consideration the Win Through the Keyhole stuff, this is the one that you want. And it's not too bad. It's around 20 bucks on Amazon, so that is where I obtained it. And then you got Bev Vincent, who has a Dark Tower companion, which it's whereas that is more so an encyclopedia, that I just showed you. This is much more along with the other thing that Bev put together, which is the Road to the Dark Tower. And I gave lots of shout outs to Bev back in 2017 when I was doing the Road to the Dark Tower movie. And those are all the videos that you can find here on the horror show where I was going installment by installment, book by book. And, giving Bev the proper shout out every single time because he is really, along with Robin, those are the two biggest DT historians that you can find. And so Bev was behind both of these books. They are just wrought with amazing bits of insight and analysis and clarification, maybe, if there are certain things that as you read through the series, because it's very dense with its mythology, especially when you talk about, a world that has moved on and how King also kind of, tampered, well, not so tampered, but just altered the mythology a little bit. Because you do know that King, in comparison with this original book, King went back and revised it and updated it when he was doing 5, 6, and 7 all in succession. And so that, it kind of altered perceptions a little bit. You're like, is it our world that's moved on, or is it a alternate reality? Because, King was getting much more heavy into the multiverse sort of stuff and whatnot with those later Dark Tower books. And so, Companion by Bev is essentially, it's relatively similar to, the encyclopedic sort of approach that Robin took. But then the Road to the Dark Tower is really exploring Stephen King's magnum opus, and I love King's quote on the front right here. He's like, wonderful. Opens doors to Roland's world that not even I knew existed. And that's the thing, right? It's all too often creators are like, I create art, and then my fans, my devotees, the people who have found meaning within it, they all too often, they have interpretations and analysis that is way beyond even the creators' sort of thinking when, you know, it was actually being put together. And, you know, just to continue, if you like the Dark Tower books, you'll like this one, enthusiastically recommended. So yes, I have been talking about doing a video for both of these, well, all three of these, I should say, with the compendium as well for quite a while. It's just the nonfiction King analysis stuff does not trend quite as well here on YouTube as I would like, because I think people, as opposed to hearing somebody talk about it, would just like to consult it themselves. And hey, if you bring the enthusiasm and the, you know, just information, I suppose that's cool. But really, more so than anything, if you are a Tower junkie, you know, to quote, you know, Mr. Eddie Dean, yes, you most definitely need to have both of these, and yes, the complete concordance, and make sure for the revised and updated, because that is the one that is going to, you know, take into consideration 4.5, which is one of my personal favorites of the entire Dark Tower series, man. I mean, I just, oh, man, I love Through the Keyhole. The story within the story within a story. And as I continue here on the 19th, at least when this is going to be released, I have to give a shout out to a ex of mine who is still a good friend, and that is none other than Amanda Stone, because she is a horror tuber, and she got me these awesome coins that I have shown various times here on the show. They all have, like, the rose, which is, you know, very significant in the storytelling of the Tower. Just do a double down real quick right there so you can see them properly. But yeah, man, they reside on my shelf back there. So it's been a hot minute since I've talked to you, Ms. Stone, but I hope you're doing kick-ass and awesome in the midst of all of this, and it is still one of my favorite gifts that was bestowed upon me. And so as far as additional Dark Tower stuff, I'm going to be very brief about this, because I've done a few different videos about this. I think like 3 or 4 about the Idris Elba, Matthew McConaughey 2017 film, which I was beyond excited for. Nicolas Arcel, I believe, is the one who directed it, if I recall correctly. But this movie was a major disappointment, and I understand where it fits in the continuity. If, you know, I'm not trying to spoil Tower stuff here, but it was basically what the Horn of Eld declared as the last time around. And so, without really divulging too much, there is a cyclical nature to Roland Deschain and everything that he has experienced in his particular magnum opus of a world. And so this was trying to be a continuation, actually, of the books, and yet it failed miserably, because the amalgamation that they tried to be, where they're picking and choosing characters and bits from all 7 books, well, you know, 8 books, they didn't really, you know, delve into much Through the Keyhole stuff, but, I mean, as far as the 7 books proper, they really, and also, I mean, Little Sisters of Eluria technically makes it, you know, even 9 stories, if we're going to be fair about it, but it just felt so bland. We don't have, you know, we don't have Susanna, we don't have Eddie. It's very much trying to be mostly the first book, but failing miserably. Idris is kicking ass and doing all that he can, but everything else, man, I mean, it was a weak script, and it was trying to just spoon feed certain bits of mythology, but yet when it's so dense, like, I really don't know what else you can really do. I still thought that McConaughey was solid in the villainous role, and I thought Idris was good as well, and including the kid who played Jake Chambers, but unfortunately the fact that, you know, they had to do pickups, reshoots, and he was at that age of puberty where puberty love. I'm sorry, I'm thinking of Attack of the Killer Tomatoes suddenly for whatever dumbass reason, but that, yeah, the timbre of his voice was altered a little bit in some of those pickups, and I don't know if they were trying to ADR or like mess with some stuff to get more of a consistency, but this movie really disappointed me, man, and that's what makes it even sadder that Amazon optioned and had that series all set up, and they're like, you know what? We think we'd be better off spending our money on Wheel of Time and on, obviously, the Lord of the Rings show, which looks badass, you know? I still haven't watched Wheel of Time because I'm not super into those books, but I know there is a heavy following, and yeah, as I've seen on Mike's channel, for instance, you know, there is a big sort of you know, just adoration and whatnot. But the Dark Tower, all that they had was the pilot, and I've I've reached my feelers out on various times trying to get a hold of a copy of that. And like I've seen the original Lock and Key pilots. I've been able, with the help of Cecil, obviously, to find a lot of these things through connections throughout the industry and whatnot, but I still have not been able to track down that pilot, man, which I was very, very into and very excited about, which did not get picked up for series, which is a real bummer. And so, at least from a visual standpoint at this particular time, we don't know if we're ever going to see another shot at the Dark Tower, at least anytime in the near future. And so, yeah, bummer, because there is so much that could be potentially mine that film did not accomplish, regrettably. So, as we jump into the rest of it, so just very briefly as I continue showing my Dark Tower collection off, this was a gift from a viewer, and I'm very stoked that I have this. This is the first time that Little Sisters of Eulalia was actually put together, and it does have an accompaniment of awesome illustrations, which are not in the Everything's Eventual reprint. So, man, if you can track down Legends and actually get those particular bits, it is really rad status. And Little Sisters of Eulalia, I don't believe that one gets as much credit aside from maybe the Marvel Comics adaptation, which I'll get to in a second. Because of the fact that, damn dude, I love that story. Anything young Roland, I've said this countless times on the channel that it's my favorite era of the Dark Tower, honestly, and I get a lot of flack from certain peeps about that because everybody loves Susanna and Oi and Eddie and whatnot, but I'm much more into young Roland and Bert and Elaine and those sort of peeps and just those younger, more formative adventures that Roland Deschain got to go on, which is cool. And this is one that, yeah, he's going through those same pavilions, which have a connective tissue with the talisman, which is interesting. And yeah, I mean, the vampire nuns and all kinds of cool shit in that regard. So I cannot recommend, if you can track down Legends and get those illustrations, very, very cool. And if not, hey, it is what it is. Grant has a edition of it, which is very pricey, which was also purchased by the lovely Lady Catherine for me. And so, yeah, one of my personal favorites. I guess I should try to. These so many hefty hardcovers, guys. But yes, Little Sisters right here, which is awesome. One of my personal favorites, and I've shown this often in videos previously. But so this has that particular tale along with a reprinting of the original Gunslinger, so the very first book. And yeah, it's a pricey purchase, but yes, much cheaper to get the Little Sisters in Everything's Eventual, or yeah, I mean, if you can track down Legends, why the hell not? So, since we've talked about the books proper in a lot of ways already on this channel, I want to give another shout out to the, man, went through the keyhole, one of my personal favorites, as I've said, Chai Lee, who was doing the comic book stuff at the time, and so this is a proper segue. Did a tremendous job with the illustrations in this, and if I can actually put it back in there properly, that's what she said, right? And I love the almost like dragony sort of scaling that you have on this. It's very, it's coarse, it's abrasive, it's very nice in that particular regard. But the Dark Tower found a new audience when Marvel started adapting comic books. And so that was the big thing for quite a while, in the fact that first they were adapting aspects of book one, where we had the flashbacks to, like, court and just the training that Roland was going through, and then it also encompassed him and Elaine and Bert going to Hambry and the romance, the Romeo and Juliet sort of aspect of everything that goes down in the flashbacks of Wizard and Glass. And dude, it's still like one of the heftiest, most massive mofos that I actually own. Even bigger, like this is even denser than the version of It, the original hardcover. This sucker is huge, dude. And so you have a retelling, and then the cool thing that they were able to do, along with the help of Robin Firth and Peter David and just all those great peeps at Marvel, is they were able to expand upon storytelling of what transpires afterwards. And I've done a couple different reviews of the comic books here, at least the first few volumes, Cecil and myself, and then I was doing a Comics Revisited sort of bit. But I mean, really, and it's not even Cliff Notes status, because of the fact that there is so much expansion that transpires later on in the series, and the art is fantastic. That it's very dense storytelling, though. I mean, we're talking lots of exposition-y, thought bubble sort of stuff, and still very, very dense dialogue. And in this particular omnibus, which I am showing off, it has a companion that has all of the supplemental stuff that was in all of those individual issues that just further flesh things out. We're talking maps like they did for the Stan comic series for Marvel, which was amazing as well. And just, I mean, so much advancement of the lore. And this series was beloved and continued to run through a few different volumes. So we had this that dealt with, the Battle of Jericho Hill eventually, and the Fall of Gilead and all that different stuff. And then after the fact, it finally kind of caught itself up with the first series, The Gunslinger, and so adapting and expanding upon lore from the very first book, the one that was collected, in 1982, hence the 40th anniversary sort of situation. This also has a companion of all kinds of cool shizzle. I mean, we're talking the original sketches that had not been like inked or colored or anything like that, additional lore expansion and essays and things of that nature. So lots of behind the scenes stuff. I am very blessed to have purchased both of these when they were initially available and not as hideously expensive on the resale market as they are. But the one that still incites a little bit of disappointment, as I've said a few different times, is the sequel series, the sequel to the sequel series, which was the adaptation of the Drawing of the Three. And it's, as I'm dropping things here, it's very peculiar in the fact that, so they did a hardcover re-release because I believe Simon & Schuster is behind all of these re-releases. And so there's this really beautiful hardcover expansion / release if you're really getting into the Dark Tower comic stuff pretty heavy. But notice, there's only 4 volumes in here. And in the Drawing of the Three run, there were 5 books. And so the one in particular that, if you're trying to purchase that and you're just like, where the hell is the Sailor? The only thing that I could really just estimate is the fact that since the Sailor is really veering into the wasteland storytelling of like the reemergence of Jake and all of that stuff that we get in the 3rd book, from a continuity standpoint, they're like, well, let's just, I mean, it was greenlit by Marvel at the time to, let's just, even though we're still calling it the Drawing of the Three, let's start jumping into the wasteland storytelling, which I thought was a little bit odd at the time. There's great expansion in these comics about, Eddie's backstory. It's pretty faithful to Susanna's as well, but yeah, it's very peculiar how for this collected re-release, it forgoes the volume that is pretty much, as far as mythology goes, steeped pretty much entirely in the 3rd book. So it's just kind of a forewarning, and once again, it's something that I've mentioned on here previously. But it's a great purchase though, man, and I'm just seeing the dust on it because it's been a hot minute since I've even looked at it. Since I mean, you read something when you first get it, and then all too often you just throw it on a shelf, and that's kind of the way things go. But and as I round things out, one of the recent acquisitions that I am just really stoked about, although I know some people do not like Sai King's narration, and that is none other than these particular audiobooks that were put out on cassette. And you're like, who the hell still has a cassette player? Mio, for sure. So King, for the first 3 volumes of The Dark Tower, actually read them himself. And I did not start properly pronouncing Deschain because everybody says Deschain, whatever. Hey man, I heard King say Deschain when I was listening to his reading of The Wind Through the Keyhole, and I was just like, okay, that's how it's supposed to be pronounced, even though I have constant correction from a lot of different people. Maybe King is saying it wrong, I don't know. I always said Bangermain, and they're like, no, it's Bangor. And I'm like, okay, Deschain, Bangor. I've said this previous times on the channel, but I love his narration, personally. I think that he really brings a lot of insight and interest to it. And, I mean, Blood and Smoke, which he narrates those himself, I always prefer, if at all possible, for a writer, if they are, confident and capable, to read their work themselves. Because the inflection and just the, I don't know, the urgency or the lack thereof. If it's supposed to be like a quieter, more I don't know, somber sort of scene or whatever, you most definitely are gonna, I mean, and they're the creator, they're the concocter of this craziness a lot of the time. And so, yes, the first volume, I know you can track this down and listen to it on YouTube, which is fine, but the, you know, collector, the completist within me, very much about that. And then, yes, the book that I have some reservations about, because, you know, the stuff with the more at the end is cool in the third act, I suppose, and, you know, it's really, I don't necessarily know if King tackles some of the race relations stuff with Susanna as tactfully as I think that he should have, but, you know, once again, personal opinion. And so the Drawing of the Three, also read by King. And then lastly, the final entry, aside from Went Through the Keyhole, that he also read, and that's why we have 12 tapes here, dude. 12 tapes, and you've got the cool, like, Sai King signing right there. So, yeah, that is at least the extent of the audiobook collection that I have for King. And yes, I've got all of the, you know, rereadings and the re-rereadings, which you have on Audible. And, you know, really tragically terrible about the brain accident that the guy who read the first 4 books, and then they brought on a different voice to do 5, 6, and 7, and then, you know, by that point, you know, that's why King, you know, for Went Through the Keyhole 4.5 was just like, I'm gonna do this myself, and, you know, it is what it is, whatever. But the last thing that I have to make mention of, and I still intend to do a video on it, but I played it a little bit, and it was kind of boring, you know, as far as, you know, somebody who grew up with, like, Double Dragon and Ninja Turtles and stuff like that, and then, you know, in turn, like, I mean, playing RPGs, but not like the super dense, like, point-and-click kind of RPG sort of stuff, and that's not necessarily what this is, but there is a Dark Tower video game that was put out shortly after the series was concluded proper, you know, so it was in that interim after book 7, the Dark Tower, you know, the 7th book, and then, you know, before 2012 when we finally got the Went Through the Keyhole. But, yeah, it's called Discordia, and for those who are familiar with a very pivotal spot where a lot of book 6 and 7 actually takes place, Crimson King connections and all of that sort of thing, Mia, whatever. But, so it's, and yet it doesn't have any of our core characters, so it's very much a continuation of the series about, you know, the butting of heads that is continuing to go down between the Tet Corporation, which is the good guys, and then Sombra, who are the bad guys, who are, you know, with, you know, Positronics and all that different stuff. And so it's, yeah, it's a free online game on StephenKing.com, and that's about the full extent of it. I have not even played through the entirety of it because I was just like, well, I'm still a gamer, and I like fighting games and Cuphead and shit like that, but as far as something that is very dense in lore, and in their press release, they claimed that they still, you know, remembered the face of their fathers and tried to, you know, despite no familiar characters being involved, really, aside from, you know, Tet and Sombra, as far as specifics go, they're like, yeah, it's, you know, it's still as faithful as possible, and I'm just like, I'm not 100% on that particular train, but hey, it is what it is. But that essentially concludes the entirety of, if you want to really get into the Dark Tower and everything involved about the expanded lore. Yes, Discordia, the reason I mentioned it last is because it's a little bit of an afterthought, a little bit ho-hum. Perhaps I'll do a video that will trend relatively poorly about it at some particular point. But yeah, it's really about the main series, I would say. The fact that there are some great audio adaptations of it that are out there, you know, as far as reading and stuff like that goes. And really, like, the comics, man, you know, and I most definitely want to revisit all of those entries properly, because I did the first 2, you know, and then, you know, there's still quite a bit as far as each of those particular installments that cover both the original book, that cover the Drawing of the Three, the sequel book. As far as, you know, being a little bit more removed from my coverage, and I guess I'm gonna ruminate on this just a wee bit here in the finale. I love those first 4 books, man. Love them. Halfway through 5, though, is where they really... King, obviously, there's no they, you know, he doesn't identify as such, but that's where King really kind of starts to lose me about halfway through 5, and that's not to say that there aren't merits to both 6 and 7, I mean, less for 6, unfortunately, but I will definitely say that there is I'm still shocked to this day, without spoiling, the cyclical aspect of that 7th and final book. And because there's an ending, and then there's an ending to an ending, it's almost like King predated Marvel with the post-credits and all that sort of shizzle, and I did not like the initial ending. And then we get to like the actual ending, you know, and there's the viewpoint from few characters, and then there's the viewpoint from Roland, our main guy. And so I'm not trying to go into like massive spoilery specifics here or anything like that, but I still, to this day, and it's one of the only things that gave me hope for that Dark Tower movie, was because of, you know, the way King decided to end it. And he even prefaces it in the book. He's like, yeah, I know this is going to piss a lot of people off, you know, proceed, you know, all of you who want, you know, and then they're like, oh, okay, the mega happy ending, you know, the Scooby-Doo ending, if I'm gonna Wayne's World it, and then they're like, nah, but this is the way things actually go down in this particular universe. So, I don't know, 1 through 4, man, especially 3 and 4, kick ass. I mean, 3 of those 4 entries, like the Gunslinger, even though I'm a little less about the drawing of the 3, I adore the first book, the third book, and the fourth book. Wolves for significant chunks of it, you know, most notably the aborted Salem's Lot sequel. So, I mean, what else are you going to say, you know, beyond that and all the Father Callahan stuff, which I adore so very much. But, yeah, everything about, you know, the end of 5 through 6 and large chunks of 7. I mean, 7 is of the tragic variety because, you know, not everybody is going to, you know, it's like the Doors song 5 to 1, where he's like, no one here gets out alive. But it's a little bit different than that, you know, because there is a survival for some. But yeah, you know that a lot of your beloveds are they're going to be kind of part of collateral damage, and yet I still love the series maybe more so for the grand scope and for the intertwinement of seeing characters like, you know, Brodigan and Dinky and those who you've seen in separate stories. That's really, I think, the just overarching mythology of the Dark Tower is probably what I love more so than how the series was actually concluded. You know, because I don't love Insomnia, but that version of the Crimson King was so much more fascinating and intriguing and foreboding to me in comparison with, you know, what we got at the end of book 7. So, I don't know. It's, I respect it and I love it. Even though there's only a few books earlier in the series that I absolutely adore and would look forward to revisiting, it's really the ambition and the extent of everything that King was trying to put together that really makes me adore the Dark Tower as much as I do. And also the fact that Roland, more so than just about any character in this, I mean, maybe Susanna, you could argue that, but as far as an arc, as far as a alteration, transformation, and more so than anything for the better. Because in that first book, man, what transpires with Jake Chambers, and then where we find Roland at, you know, the back end of this particular journey, he has grown, he has improved, and his cold cynicism that is so just, man, it is so purveying and just taking over everything from, you know, the nastiness that he encountered as a child, and so, or as a young man, I guess is a better way of putting it. But, yeah, there is a lot to the Dark Tower universe, as you guys can obviously see, between comics, between video games, between all of the audio adaptations, and, unfortunately, the missed opportunities that you had in, you know, both movies and the elusive series. So that is the white whale of sorts that I am still trying to track down, and you know, hey, who knows, hopefully at some point I will actually be able to, because I know the Losers Club, they use those higher up connections. I'm trying to remember if they're Fangoria, or because there's the Losers Club and then there's the Kingcast. I think Kingcast is Fangoria and Losers Club is Bloody Disgusting. I don't know, but yeah, that's hey, we are very lucky that J Photos was able to help us out with seeing those early stuff of King's Kid, Lock and Key, the aborted attempts, because they did 2 different attempts at Lock and Key. So that is King's Kid's magnum opus, Lock and Key, and the Dark Tower is very obviously Papa El Rey, as I will so affectionately call him until I am blessed to have my last breath. So I extend a grande gracias to anybody who is checking this out here on the 19th of July. I am Jaime Fuego. You can find me on all social media sectors, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Here on the YouTubies, we are actually Tuesday evening, yeah, because today is Tuesday, Tower Tuesday. Cecil and myself are going to check out Nope, which we are going to have a review of here on Friday. So that is something exciting and very much to look forward to. I loved Get Out. Us, it was a little less about that one, but man, Get Out kicked ass. And the fact that Steven Yeun, Dana Kaluuya, like there's a terrific cast for this particular one. So here in a couple of days, you will be able to see the review for that. And we also have all kinds of great trailer reactions, and we did a big review roundup this past Sunday. So that's exciting to just get caught up, after a few months of not so much inactivity, but just we tried to streamline and spearhead everything that we had seen in the last few months and give both the, thumbs up and obviously the ulterior in that particular regard. So, once again, I've been Fuego. Y'all have been Rad Status. I very much look forward to talking proper exclusively about the second book and the first book for their respective anniversaries here in the coming weeks. And, everybody, until the Reel of Ka comes around once more, hasta luego, and amigos, constant readers and viewers alike, say thank you. I'm hoping we have been well met and that this, palaver has been to your liking. I hope we share more of it sooner rather than later. And until then, remember to stay scared. And yes, read Stephen King. I mean, I know a lot of people don't give as much credit to the first one, but I love the first Dark Tower. 40 years, y'all.